Within days, Da Nang was transformed from a once thriving port city into an armed and desperate refugee camp seething with resentment against the North Vietnamese, against Thieu and his cronies, against the U.S. allies who had abandoned them. In the minds of the 1 million Vietnamese overflowing Da Nang, hate and fear had replaced faith and hope. On March 29, 1975, artillery shells began falling on Da Nang in central Vietnam as 35,000 North Vietnamese Army NVA troops prepared to attack. It was not necessary. Panic had done their job for them. 2 days earlier, plane and helicopter airlifts had been canceled when American pilots reported taking withering fire from rogue ARVN units. Now these same South Vietnamese soldiers turned their guns on civilians as the latter clawed to reach rescue ships. Women, children, and the elderly were trampled in the rush to the sea. Fishing boats packed with civilians were confiscated by South Vietnamese soldiers who tossed their countrymen overboard before shooting it out among themselves for the precious berths. The 6 U.S. Marines detached to the Da Nang consulate, attempting to help people board at the docks, watched in horror as mothers who did manage to reach the water's edge set their babies adrift in small pails, hoping the tide would carry them out to boats or toss them at already moving barges. Most fell short and were drowned. One Marine witnessed a South Vietnamese Army officer shove women and children into the space between the dock and a boat, where they were crushed against the pilings as he scrambled aboard. Another Marine noticed several elderly Vietnamese disappear beneath a sea of bodies in an overflowing barge. By the time he dragged them out from the pile, they had been smothered to death. That night, a deadly face-off between the Da Nang consulate's MSGs and an ARVN company was narrowly averted when the Marines, surrounded by their erstwhile allies, joined the civilian consulate staff hiding in the back of a stolen garbage truck that made its way to the docks from where they escaped on a leaky barge. The final blow came when Thieu's top commander in Da Nang, Lieutenant General No Quang Trong, abandoned his post to swim for the last U.S. naval vessel sailing from port. 100,000 of Trong's troops surrendered. With Da Nang gone, the southern coastal provinces soon followed. Within weeks, the North Vietnamese and their Viet Cong comrades surrounded the capital city of Saigon and prepared to invade. For all intents and purposes, the long war in Vietnam was about to come to an end. Except, that is, for a small number of Marines at the U.S. Embassy who were not yet prepared to lay down their arms. Part 1. Dominoes. Saigon, 0300, 29 April 1975. We could be looking at an Alamo situation here. Major Jim Keane addressing his fellow Marine security guards at the U.S. Embassy in Saigon. 1. The monsoon rains had arrived early. They blew in from the southeast, and Marine Staff Sergeant Mike Sullivan stood on the roof of the U.S. Embassy watching the towering storm clouds scudding up from the South China Sea. He marked the difference between the distant bursts of heat lightning, sudden, silent detonations of white iridescence illuminating the jungle to the horizon, and the tiny pinpricks of orange artillery shells detonating near Bien Hoa, just 20 miles away. Tonight, however, the light show held little interest for Sullivan until he heard the North Vietnamese rockets whistling overhead, heard them before he saw them and recognized their distinctive whine from long experience in the bush. 122 millimeters, he knew. A 122's peculiar sound always reminded Sullivan of the muscular hiss of a narrow-gauge diesel locomotive. Shtkunk, shtkunk, shtkunk. The veteran staff sergeant knew his artillery, and he knew his railroads. From instinct, Sullivan pictured their makeshift launchers, ingenious, ladder-shaped devices fashioned from thick bamboo stalks that could be toted up a steep mountain trail or across a muddy rice paddy, but no, he realized suddenly, not tonight. There were too many rockets, which meant they had to be fired from the flatbed of a Russian